In my never-ending fight for common sense, sanity, and truth, and my deep desire to help people, my compassion, I endeavor to find the most interesting and accurate information about, things that we're all passionate about. And one of those things that we're all passionate about, of course, is health. And in one of the ways that we can dramatically improve people's health, according to research on both sides of the political aisle, is to get people to quit smoking. It would strike me as common sense for the folks out there who are endeavoring to try to help people to quit smoking to fully embrace the idea of harm reduction. And yet that's not happening. And to try to help explain why is Jeff Stier. Jeff is from the National Center for Public Policy Research, and he joins me on the phone. It's one of the things you happen to be very passionate about as well, Jeff, and yet here we are in 2011. I've got a document I printed out by a group called American for, ASH. Now I can't remember what it is. John Bansaf's group, ASH, which is the non-smokers organization for their rights, claiming that harm reduction techniques like e-cigarettes are just as dangerous as smoking. And I do not understand where this comes from.
You said that the public health community has not embraced harm reduction. I only wish. They have put their energies into opposing harm reduction. Now, John Bansaf is a very talented lawyer. He's made lots of money suing the tobacco industry. He's sued the food industry because he blames companies selling consumers food for people getting fat. So this is a guy who is a professor at George Washington University and has made a name for himself suing companies. So that's what he's about, John Bansaf. And I read this letter. You were kind enough to send it to me from Action on Smoking and Health.
That's what it is, Action on Smoking and Health. It's the non-smokers' rights group out there, or so he says.
Some of the language in their letter, I'll just read a very quick excerpt of it. Reminds me of something. I guess you could say reminds me of something funny. They write in this letter that that e-cigarettes, which they're trying to ban, and part of it I think is it reads like a fundraising letter, that some airlines are considering allowing it in airlines. And he writes, there are numerous reports that they are already being used in hospitals, bold-faced hospitals, restaurants, shopping malls, and even in offices. They are coming to a location near you. Now that language reminds me of a brilliant segment done by Penn and Teller, making fun of a bunch of hippies for signing on to a ban of a chemical called dihydrogen monoxide. And they went around telling they went around telling a bunch of hippies at a convention that this chemical, dihydrogen monoxide, is found in the food we eat, in our beverages, and it's showing up in reservoirs. And of course, dihydrogen monoxide is water. And they got people to sign a petition to ban this thing that's showing up everywhere.
Not a single one did not sign the petition. I saw it. I've put it up on my Facebook page about 100 times. Not a soul did not sign the petition to ban water. Not one person at that convention. And the best one was that it's used in nuclear power. That's exactly what that letter from Bansaf's group did read like. However, it is a serious threat to public health. And I mean, nobody's really going to ban water. And so Penn and Teller's point was more of a humorous one of people being silly and not thinking. But that silly and not thinking will translate into a ban on, well, let's just look at e-cigarettes. But it's also other types of harm reduction products out there as well. The Camel Snooze, the Marlboro Snooze, the Sticks, the Orbs, these different things that are smoke-free and so much better for you. And yet You've got groups out there scaring kids, scaring adults into thinking that they're awful and they're just as dangerous as cigarettes. That, my dear friend Jeff Stier, is going to hurt people. It hurts people. It potentially kills people. And so the policies that are being promoted by public health groups are killing people.
Absolutely. That's why the Penn and Teller skit was so powerful, because if you understand what they were spoofing, was something it was funny, right? It made great TV. You could find it on YouTube. It's probably the top Penn and Teller video on YouTube these days. Just Google or look on YouTube for Penn and Teller ban on water if you don't know how to spell dihydrogen monoxide. But the thing is that it was so on point, and BANZAF and Action on Smoking and Health used that same type of scare language, trying to appeal to people's kind of base fears and playing off of their lack of understanding of science. And you're absolutely right. It is harmful to public health. And the language they use about how there are deadly chemicals and how the nicotine is going to kill you is just so antithetical to the scientific understanding what we have about cigarettes. The real reason cigarettes are going to kill you is because you burn and inhale tobacco, and the burning of the tobacco creates thousands of chemicals. We don't even know what they are. You inhale them, and they make you sick. Those are not the chemicals that you're inhaling nicotine and FDA-approved. Nothing in the nicotine, in the e-cigarette, is not already approved by the FDA for pharmaceutical-approved drugs. The only problem that the FDA has, I believe, with e-cigarettes is that they haven't paid a lot of money for expensive studies to prove that they're more effective than other nicotine replacement therapies like the gum and the patch. The problem is the gum and the patch for many people are not effective because it doesn't give you the hand-to-mouth, it doesn't give you the simulation.
No, I think these are the most, I think these things are the single most effective tool to quit smoking you could possibly use. Now, companies can't say that because they would violate federal law. But I can say that they are the single most effective tool. And I've, as you know, Jeff, I've battled this smoking problem for years and years and years. Let's look at another technique you can use. There are other products out there as well that are being they're not as readily demonized, but they have been sort of pre-chewed for demonization. And that is the smoke-free, non-vapor, non-electronic cigarette products. That there is something that looks like a cinnamon stick. It's being offered as a way, and it gives you sort of a chewing sensation. So that's the Camel sticks. There are small mints that you can use and that give you a pretty potent hit of nicotine. And some folks have been able to successfully switch. In fact, R.J. Reynolds is advertising that you switch to a smoke-free alternative. And they suggest their products.
That's the irony. Critics of harm reduction have long argued I say long, for the past 2 years maybe, have argued that companies who sell smokeless tobacco are only doing it for what they call dual use. In other words, when you can't smoke, if you're on a plane or if you're at a restaurant where they ban smoking, that this is only to hold you over until your next cigarette. And that was the criticism, that it's not about switching, that it's only for the purpose of dual use. Now, of course, the reason that companies did not argue switch is because they're not allowed by law, a law that Congress passed and the FDA is enforcing, by law are not allowed to tell you the very clear truth that smokeless tobacco is less harmful than cigarettes. It's obvious, but companies aren't allowed to say it. So they've had their hands tied in terms of making the switch argument. But Reynolds went out ahead of everyone else, and I'm sure in a very carefully, legally vetted advertisement, said switch. They never said it's less harmful, which is true. They just said switch. And I think it was a great ad. And of course, the public health advocates were against it. Can you imagine that? There was an anti-smoking ad paid for by a tobacco company, and the public health community argued against it. And the FDA and Congress tied their hands from making it more effective. In other words, forcing them to go back to the dual-use argument.
They should be able to say, and Jeff has argued this, back at your old position and your new position, you have argued this. They should be allowed to say, look, this is orders of magnitude safer for you. You should be allowed to say that in an advertisement. There is data to back it up. I mean, I've had a fellow on this program, Dr. Brad Radu. I believe at the time I had him on the show, he was with the University of Alabama. He had done extensive research onto smoking and snus, which were the little packets of tobacco. In Sweden, men in a study were encouraged to replace cigarette smoking with these packets of tobacco. Many of them were successful. And in a longitudinal study showed a dramatic reduction in the typical types of problems you see associated with cigarette smoking. Lung issues, coughing issues, those kinds of issues. You should be allowed to say that. You should. That you can't is an absolute abomination because we are talking about people's lives. And there are two ways to, the two biggest things you can prevent, causing yourself premature death, right, is losing weight if you are morbidly obese, and quitting smoking if you smoke. I mean, right. I think then this is, now, Jeff, I know you're a policy guy as well. I think we should take a tack that accuses the public health community of being racist. Because let's face it, they protected menthol flavoring in the FDA tobacco control law. Congress protected menthol flavoring, which is the preferred flavoring that is deliberately marketed to African-American smokers. So we should use that, and then we should also remember to point out that people who smoke cigarettes disproportionately have lower incomes, and frankly, as a percentage of the population, a larger percentage of the population who smoke cigarettes are Black and Hispanic. Let's accuse them of being racist and trying to kill Black and Hispanic people.
Well, before you know it, and keep a careful eye out, because either in next month or by the end of March, an FDA panel will offer a recommendation about menthol, so be careful what you wish for there.
I'm telling you, I'm telling you, no, I do not want. I mean, I want people to make the choice for themselves. I want people to choose. If you're going to choose to smoke, you're an idiot. I did. I was an idiot. With your eyes wide open what you're getting into. But if you're going to quit, then you should have the option to have full knowledge of what's available as ways to do it, at least to reduce the harm you are doing to yourself from the inhalation, the constant over and over and over daily, multiple times daily inhalation of smoke. And, with the one single person in America, notwithstanding, who believes smoking cigarettes is good for you, and she happens to live in this city, and I won't say her name because it just feeds her ego. But believe it or not, Jeff, she exists. Most people understand that is a bad idea to continually inhale smoke over and over and over again. I don't care if it's from burning paper bags or smoking cigarettes. It's not good for you.
Vicki, my division at the National Center for Public Policy Research is called the Risk Assessment Division, and RAD. And I'm going to offer a radical idea. I think the federal government ought to fund research into harm reduction. Because if the tobacco industry funds research as to why it's effective, that shows that it's effective, as they did in Sweden, they're not going to accept it. Well, it was funded by the tobacco industry. So I think the FDA ought to set up a panel to look at whether or not, I don't know, people like you, because you're just one example, but let's do a scientific study of people using e-cigarettes to see whether, in fact, they all drop dead, as John Bansaf wants you to think, or whether, in fact, some of them were able to quit smoking.
105 days.
Let the government do a study on that. Let it be a peer-reviewed study. Instead of the government wasting money on meetings about banning menthol and about all these ridiculous things, why don't they do something worthwhile and help people quit smoking using new methodologies?
Especially because we know these little companies that are engaged in producing, particularly the e-cigarettes. But some of the smaller companies who produce harm reduction products as well. If in fact they are required to fund billion-dollar studies that would pass the muster of the FDA, they're going to go out of business. It's as simple as that. They'll go out of business. Big Tobacco can't fund these studies because, as you pointed out, Jeff, it's Big Tobacco. And, of course, nobody trusts what they have to say, thanks to guys like John Bansaf, and maybe even for good reason, I think. So why not have the federal government fund this research? I mean, if the single biggest cause of preventable death in the United States is smoking cigarettes, then instead of haranguing, and just simply making people's lives miserable who smoke, how about you give them some options out there? And this, I'm telling you what, 105 days. Never thought I could do it. And it wasn't even hard. I haven't smoked a cigarette in 105 days. And it wasn't even hard.
Government want you to know about it.
And government doesn't even want you to know they exist. And if you do know they exist, they want you to think they're bad for you. It is frustrating, but I love Jeff Stier and all the great work that you guys do over there at the National Center for Public Policy Research. I appreciate everything you've done in your past duties as well. Jeff Stier, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Fighting the good fight. He always is. We'll take a quick break.